to another episode of the LEI'D Back Life podcast, where we're talking about how to love entrepreneurship and improve daily and ultimately live a great life. Interestingly enough, I talked about this last week. We lined up the back-to-back podcast episodes with other Josh, and this week, Josh Pies. Last week, Josh.
Who's other Josh?
Josh Wilson. So last week, you were other Josh. This week, Josh Wilson is other Josh. Don't ask me why, what I did between two Joshes was the podcast back-to-backs, but here we are.
Insert Josh in a round joke.
There we go. So for those of you that don't know Josh Pies, he's the host of Bootstrapped Unicorns Podcast and calls himself the Hippie Capitalist at C47 Films Digital Studios, a video podcast production company in Winter Park, Florida. Josh's life passions include entrepreneurship and entertainment. His work at C47 Films merges his passion in a way that helps small and medium-sized businesses express their expert voices while also courting their ideal referral partners in an innovative and strategic business development strategy. Josh has produced multiple feature films and documentaries, having written and directed a few of them. His work has earned more than 50 industry awards for film, television, advertising, and marketing communications. What's up, man?
It sounds like it buttons it up. Yeah, good work.
I mean, you gave us the bio, so...
Did I?
Or
Okay,
somebody
thanks,
did.
ChatGPT.
Yeah. Anyway, so look, there's so many shows and podcasts focused on business and marketing and whatever.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
wanted to have one focused on living a great life. And so that is this one. But part of that, obviously, I think is like marketing for your business in a way that is cool to your life. So last week, Josh Wilson and I broke down the benefits of having a podcast, how to find guests, what to do during, how to use that as the tool to a great life. He does not offer that as a service. You do. So I'm curious to have that conversation again from your perspective and really dive into, I think you called it how to create content with a content stack that has high value and low effort via video podcasting, which
That is correct.
speaks into my soul.
Well, I mean, I like working smart, not hard, right? That's, we should all be focused on that, because I guess if you're going to be a lawyer with a life, or in any other industry with a life, you've got to work smart, not hard, so you can go spend time doing the things that really matter, which, not that our jobs don't matter, but our families ought to matter significantly. And we know those old, especially in the 80s, like entrepreneurs either grew massive businesses or had good families, but there was no way to like have that at the same time, according to what we observed in that distant past. And so I don't want to be that guy, and I know you don't want to be that guy. So, it's the smart, not hard thing makes sense. And then, of course, social media and the existence online of all of the things kind of builds this perception that we all need to become influencers in our business, whether it's true or not. There's a lot of people who feel it. I don't know if they actually overtly believe it, but they kind of feel it. And so my practice at C47 is almost the unmarketing, in the sense that I really believe that a good podcast, especially if you're business to business, or maybe you're high ticket, which, define that as you will. A good
Can
podcast.
you define that as you will, though?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, business to business is kind of its own sales animal, right? That is it is a networking based sales proposition. You have to go and find the places where your clients are hanging out and spend time with them and network with them. But, B2C, high ticket, real estate, maybe legal, things that are in the 1 comma and up club when it comes to transactions, it is a little bit higher ticket than, say, selling bread at a bazaar, right? It's a lower ticket, higher volume proposition, far more transactional. I don't know that the street vendor for bread is going to find great success as a podcaster. They might have a different marketing play, but I know for my clients, what we're offering them is, above anything else, is actually perspective. Relationships matter so much, and you're a relationship person. You
Thank you.
build great relationships with people. That's why I have such an affinity for you myself, because you're so adept at building quality relationships. I think it has done very well for you personally in business, but also your overall business. So extrapolating that type of behavior, what would it be like instead of going for another coffee or another golf outing or another steak dinner, choosing to do something more memorable and unique with your ideal referral partners? I don't mind the idea of working with end clients, but it's way better to have ideal referral partners who could send you many end clients. So the idea of having a podcast where you can have guests on, what if that's a business development activity? What if it's the act of bringing your ideal referral partner onto your show where you celebrate them? I've even made the argument for some of my clients and potential clients that their show should not be about the business that they do, but it should be actually about the market that their referral partner covets, and their show should be about them and their market. And you should be delivering value for your referral partner more than you're delivering in a way that would build an audience for your own business. No, I think there could be a merger, but I mean, if we're just talking kind of this utopian philosophical version of how you might create a show, wouldn't it make a lot of sense to give your guest such a place of honor that the entire audience that you're building is actually for your guest and not for yourself? It's a very interesting relationship play. And that's the type of thing that we propose. Now, in actuality, most of our clients are doing something that is relevant for the guest and for themselves. And so they both enjoy the audience that they could build. I mean, true story. Way back in 17, feels like eons ago, 2017, not that long ago, I was interviewing the superintendent of Cleveland schools. Have I told you this story?
I don't think so, but I don't really remember Cleveland school superintendents that well, so it's not getting hit by a bus story. So
no. I can tell you that if you need that, by the way, because of course you always enjoy that story. But I'm interviewing her in preparation for a big project that we're doing in Ohio, and out of nowhere she pauses and she goes, "Do you know what?" And she started getting on a soapbox, and she was explaining to me that they had surveyed all the juniors and seniors district wide to find out what their career aspirations were in that moment. And they had like 200 different check boxes that you could check. And there was a fill in the blank area, and they wanted your top 3 options. And there were some that checked boxes, but the vast majority of them wrote in their aspirations.
Content
NBA
creator.
superstar.
Oh, okay. All right.
Rapper.
Okay.
Influencer. Top 3. And I say superstar, all-star, NBA all-star. And so basically they were saying, I, as one of the many in Cleveland, will be LeBron James. All of them are going to grow up and be LeBron James. And I find that just kind of painful and a little bit fascinating. And it, at some point they'll get a dose of reality that one of them made it and the rest of them didn't in relation to that aspiration. And so I look at content online and I go, okay, if we're all being told we should be influencers and the end goal is to be known by many and turn into the Kardashians or the LeBron James or whatever of your industry, I think we're selling ourselves an interesting bill of goods. And it's very much a marathon to get to that point. Mr. Beast was being interviewed the other day on Theo Von. I loved the interview because Mr. Beast was explaining how long it took before he even made $1. It's 4.5 years before he made $1 on YouTube. And then that year he made $20,000. And then eventually he became the character we know as Mr. Beast. Now I'm sure he's probably a billionaire, and I know he's got over 400 employees, and he's this cultural phenomenon with brand deals and all sorts of stuff. But nobody sees the hard work and the marathon that goes into becoming that character. And he, of course, is the most known on the planet in that role, biggest YouTuber on the planet by the numbers. We can't all be the LeBron James of YouTube either, but we can be really important in the world of our ideal referral partners. So if we were to podcast and do all of these other things in relation to them, and then we do get YouTube videos out of them. You get podcast episodes that you can release in multiple podcast platforms, and we can cut out social media content and release it as well. I can sustain myself through that marathon as I'm building relationships because I almost don't care whether the audience builds. I care about building a relationship, and I care about the authenticity of the content, which is, of course, one of the keys to having good content is being authentic. And so it all seems to work. It's all about your intentionality and focusing on the people that you can directly affect, and then sustaining yourself. So that's my belief system around this. That's how we do what we do at C47.
Can you give me this as an example? Pick a lawyer, pick a common referral source for them, and then
Okay,
walk me through this at the 10,000 foot
sure.
view.
Personal injury.
Okay.
Personal injury is an easy one to pick on, and it's actually a great one to pick on in the sense that,
Because
you
I do
know,
it.
well, one, because you do it.
Okay.
Two, because your market's extremely saturated with the Morgans of the world who spend a lot of dollars on, and it's very hard to compete with them on pay-per-click and all these other things because
Okay.
they're driving prices up, right? So PI should definitely be interested in removing themselves, like you have, from that race, and instead focus on building a show for your referral partners. So I fit in the referral partner category in the sense that you built great relationship with me and I trust you and I have a large network. So I might not be in industry, not the natural referral partner, but the way you've built relationships and you're having me on your show now is another good relationship touch point. So you're already doing it, but you and I both know a whole bunch of chiropractors in the region. What would it be like if you ended up hosting them on your show a lot? And as you're releasing your episodes, you're focusing your organic keywords and all. Maybe you do small spend on social media, maybe throw $25 behind an episode or something, and you do it all towards health and wellness type categories to bring in people that would come through the door for them and build their practices. Now, every time somebody comes through that door, because of your hard work, who gets the credibility and the credit for those wins? Probably you. And hopefully it's trackable. I mean, you got to do some best practices and try to figure out how to make sure that you're aware of what can happen and what is happening. But even if you're not, um, there's something magical about doing this thing that you're doing on behalf of the chiropractors. And so going and finding healthcare physicians, chiropractors, I'm trying to think of the other ones. I mean, I was in a car accident and you and I dealt a whole bunch with that. And, you know, the brain injury specialist and anybody who might be involved in that flow of potential referrals upstream to you.
Physical therapists, nutritionists, ER
It's
rooms.
all of that. So getting all of them to appreciate the relationship you've built and the work you've done on their behalf is a very interesting business model. And you know, you might end up becoming the host that is the host who's the most in the healthcare industry and grow an audience in the healthcare industry. I don't think that's a bad thing, not for the work you do. And it can be known that you're a personal injury attorney. You know, I don't think you hide that. I don't think that's one of those things where you suppress that in favor of the chiropractors of the world and the physical therapists of the world. That to me, what you're doing dovetails and aligns so well with them that maybe it's 70-30, 70% them, 30% you, but it's a 50-50 relationship you're trying to build. You know, it's two people building real rapport, real relationship. And that's to me what matters most.
So, but that's the part. So I want to go deeper on that.
Yeah.
So in this example, you know, we have this I got your back show or something like that.
Yeah.
Is the lawyer interviewing Dr. A, B, C, D, E, F, G all down the line on individual episodes, or is the lawyer interviewing like the same group of referral sources over and over again, or like what's the?
I think it's a little bit up for grabs. I think
Okay.
the topic of the show is for a personal injury attorney, health and wellness before, during, and after injury.
Okay.
And so it gives you enough space to set the tone for the audience that, yes, I'm a personal injury attorney and I've seen healthy people and I've seen unhealthy people and I've seen everything in between. And health matters. I've discovered that health matters. And so I have my friends on who understand health of all kinds, and we discuss this issue. And so, you know, like we both know Dr. Michael Gampolo. Dr. Mike is a great personal injury healthcare physician, but he's also a general wellness healthcare physician. You can come in, you need your back cracked, and then some. He's got your back. So he'd be a great person to have on a show like that because he can talk about his own experiences as to why he came into the industry because he was injured. Talk about all sorts of accident cases and the types of things he's seen, and everything from mindset to diligence and showing up and doing your exercises to TENS units to all the things that you might have involved in a personal injury case. Also, the concept of truth and documentation and all of the things that make a healthy case. Because he's partnered with so many attorneys to do it right and do it honestly. So he'd be a great candidate to have on more than once. You could also go to a networking event, meet a new guy who's got an interesting voice, and you want to build a relationship and have that person on to tell about their observations, their experiences. Because the audience, of course, is there to learn about how to be well. They need anecdotes to inspire them to want to do something well. And we need to hear things repeatedly as human nature. I can't hear it once and then just go implement. I need to have reinforcement. So I think it's fair to have multiples of healthcare professionals come on, maybe more than once, maybe not more than once. I think there's, in my version of what we're talking about, there's self-permission to have people on regularly, but also no rules about whether a new person can or can't become a guest on the show. Because again, this is a business trying to grow their influence with important people. So if you've got a new important person coming into your world, somebody who could be a great referral source, and you want to foster that new relationship, I think that needs to be fair game.
Well, to go back to your earlier point about the business or family, it's the Jim Collins and, right? It's having people on consistently and having new people.
Right. Yeah. Well, and diligent salespeople usually have that list of people that they have their A list, their B list, their C list, that they have to rank them based on their likelihood of inputting into their world. And they know that people fall off the A list for a variety of reasons, retirement, change of job, whatever. And they've got to grow people from their B list up to their A list. And so if somebody's doing that type of mental exercise, they're aware that they need to spend a lot of time with the A's and the top tier B's, but also still curate the rest of the list. And so there's kind of this give and take and this kind of voodoo math you got to do in order to try to do it as well as you can. And so, yeah, you do a lot of time with your usual suspects, and then you court new people into who may grow into being a usual suspect.
So I want to be clear. I have never done this from the standpoint that you are sharing. However, when I talk to my clients from a referral standpoint, I always tell them at the very least, you're going to spend 20% of your time looking for new people because of what you said. At the other end, you're going to take what percentage of referral sources are already meeting your expectations and use that as your percentage. So if you want 50 referral sources sending you 5 cases a year, and you currently have 25, you spend 50% of your time on those 25 and 50% of your time finding new people. And then you run the math until it gets to 20%. Does that sound like it would work for what you're talking about?
I think so, yeah. I mean, you could easily do a show where you go right to your top 20, your I guess it's 100% of your most active people, that 25 that doesn't make up a full 50, and right. Say, hey, I want to have you on X number of shows this year. Will you play this game with me and let's help people? Because of course the content is about helping people, and you get them emotionally involved and you really involve them. It's got to be genuine. It's got to be real. And then they need to understand that you're going to fill out more opportunities to bring people in, and multiple guests on the show. I mean, there's no competition here when we're helping people, right? It could be 3 chiropractors all talking chiropractic. It could be, and the lawyer leading it, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do how you deliver the show, but in spirit, you're just very clear that you're taking the most important people in your world and the future most important people in your world and giving them a place of honor to do well by this audience. And this audience has got to be something that they care about.
Hey all, I want to take a brief break from this episode of LEI'D Back Life to tell you about a really good opportunity that we have for all of you. So I'm going to be hiring a new executive assistant while my current executive assistant is still here. This is probably the first time I'm able to do this as seamlessly as it's going to happen this time. So I wanted to sell that opportunity to all of you so that you can have the opportunity to either have your EA trained or feel comfortable training an EA for you going forward. That's going to be $1,000. What you're going to get is our 50-page SOP, which you could work off of right there. A discussion about what we're looking for in this position, why the specific things that we want for my EA based upon me, our job posting from this, a series of interview questions, and then last but certainly not least, you'll have access to 2 different 2-hour trainings. You can come, you can have your assistant come, you can watch the trainings afterwards, and then 2 other 1-hour Ask Us Anything. So that would be me, my current EA, and the future EA. That'll be all for the month of February, and anybody who buys it, you'll have access to recordings going forward. If you buy it soon enough, you'll have access to show up with us live as those things happen. So that's going to be $1,000. If you're interested, you can click in the link that will be attached to this video, or just reach out and let me know, and we will add you to it. All right. And now back to this episode of the LEI'D Back Life podcast. So, all right, let's run with this Dr. G example further on. We have, the doctor come on a couple different times over the course of a year. Like, what else are we using the podcast for in terms of maintaining and fostering that relationship?
Okay, so a couple of things. One, if you're having regular guests on, that usually involves some kind of collaboration and planning. It's not just you. So if Dr. G is going to come on your show once per quarter, right, then you probably need to have some kind of quarterly interaction specifically about the show. And so the next time you go and grab a bite to eat with Dr. G, which is something you're probably already planning on doing by way of I know how you network, but also how a lot of people do. One of the items is this deliberate choice to collaborate with Dr. G about the topics that are top of mind and the opportunities about what he might be able to talk about. It also might open up opportunities for you to go, oh my gosh, I had a guest on recently talking about the same thing. Maybe that person comes on, and now maybe you're making a quality introduction. It is literally a networking opportunity for this whole group of people that you want to come with you in this journey. So it becomes more strategic. It becomes more deliberate. They might not own the show, but they own a piece of the purpose of the show by being a part of it in that way. And so, yeah, I mean, that's how he's more deeply involved. That's how other people are more deeply involved. And that's how you end up building like this tribe. There's almost a community helping fuel the content on your behalf.
Well, and I think if they have a podcast, you do the home and home, rotate through. I think you can also tag them on the clips in between. Hey, throwback to when so-and-so.
Oh, for certain. That's the kind of almost the social media behavior that happens naturally. And I consider that a celebration of the content, even though the audience is looking at it as new content from you. And of course, I love the idea of growing an audience. I just don't worry about it that much. I worry about the relationships first and always. But if you think about all that content that does get released, because yes, we recorded a show, it went on YouTube. The audio went to 12 podcast outlets. And an editor said, hey, I just found 10 clips from this episode that are really shareable. I'll clip them out, put text over them. We'll get them out into social media and make sure people are tagged. Cool. That's what I call a hippie capitalist love fest, because you've got multiples of businesses. Maybe it's one guest, maybe it's 2 or 3 guests. Everybody's a business person of some kind. And you're tagging the snot out of that and sharing it like crazy, giving them the files so they can back tag you, whatever. Go and have fun with it. It's a celebration of your relationship and your expertise.
I want to highlight, though, something that you said before, because, I think, at least from my perspective, this sounds easier when you already have the relationships. But I want to highlight what you talked about, you meet that person for the first time. To me, it's kind of awkward. I played golf with this guy, chiropractor. We had a blast. I'm a terrible golfer. But then it's what's the next thing? Have we moved from the, golf tournament to the one-on-one lunch? Have we moved to, what is that transition? And I think a podcast becomes a really good transition because there's going to be people that are as boring as watching paint dry in the interview. There's going to be people that cancel last second. There's going to be people that no show. There's going to be people that are super engaging, that
Yeah,
it's a good opportunity on a low risk is not the right word. Low. I don't. It seems to me like it's an easy second or third step to get to know somebody.
I agree. Yeah, and you could do it one of a couple of ways. I mean, you had a great golf outing with somebody, and you go, "You're super interesting. Come on my podcast." And they go, "What?" And you go, "Yeah, come on my podcast. It's a podcast about health and wellness. You're a health and wellness guy, and you're really healthy. Look at that golf swing. Holy crap. Let's talk about our golf game and talk about staying healthy. Come on." And then it's way different than, and hear me when I say this, but when I inviting people out for lunch, guy or girl, it kind of feels like a date. And it's a little awkward for me. I'd rather go get a beer and hang out than go for lunch until I actually know somebody where it doesn't feel like a date because it's completely casual. It's two people eating. But the whole like, hey, you're a new person, let's go grab something to eat. Guy or girl, doesn't matter. It's kind of like, okay, do I have to dress up for this? Like, it's just, I would rather do something that is kind of like creative collaborative than, and this is just my personality, right? I just, some
And to
people
be
are
clear,
totally
for those of you that can, well, whether you can see Josh or not, Josh normally shows up in a really cool, like over the top blazer to lunch, and I'm
right.
in a Hawaiian shirt. So like,
Yeah, we're a little reversed today, but one of the things is I forgot that I was going to be filming from home, and a lot of my work blazers are actually hanging at the office. So it's like,
uh,
oh, I'm going to disappoint them like crazy. But here
oh
we
man,
are.
it's okay. Yeah, well, so like it's the Pulp Fiction, right? Like, at what point can we just sit there and not awkward silence for a couple seconds? And I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm pretty comfortable with people. So like if lunch was the only option, cool, fine. But
Yeah.
there's also I have discovered recently, and maybe it's because I'm the president of my BNI chapter and I have to interact with people a little bit more purposefully than I ever have. And, we got 30 some odd people, all sorts of different personalities. There are more people in sales that are introverts and kind of awkward about it than I knew. And super kind people, super nice people, great experts in their industry. It's no pick. It's just a personality thing. And I just didn't realize how many people are like, oh, this is really intimidating to attack an opportunity as a from the disc personality profile, a high I, and get somebody excited about hanging out with me. It's not always natural. So if you've got more purpose behind the ask, and I think there's a lot of purpose, like I have a show with purpose and you can help me with my show, come collaborate with me. It's a lot different than just, hey, I'm the life of the party, let's go have a salad. uh,
So are you? I think the high I's are the extroverts, right? Okay.
Correct. Like
So
I'm a
like
high D, high I. So I am kind of business owner. High D's are the 3% of the
dominant.
planet,
Yeah.
dominating personality, and I'm a high I, which explains why I'm who I am. Um, I'm very low on S and C. So the high I's will walk into the room and usually all eyes are on them and they have no problem doing the TikTok dance on the stage. And the high D's will then tell everybody to follow, and most of them will because that's kind of their commanding presence. The C's are calculating in like a spreadsheet way, not a negative way. They just want the facts and the figures. And the S's are 63% of people who have been polled come in as high S, which
Which is
is
like
supporters.
supporters. Okay.
Yeah, they're the supporters. And so, 11% of the population is high I. And so we associate salespeople with being high I skewing D or high D skewing I, which may be true for top sales professionals. But how many salespeople are on the planet? There's no way that 14% of the sales of the world has all become salespeople. There's a whole bunch of salespeople who are in that S&C crowd. And I think podcasting would be very liberating for them because they can be a little bit more deliberate and also more supportive of their counterparts. They don't need to rely on just total extroversion.
Well, but also like I tell this story all the time. Like I like that you said high, because I used to say I'm a giant D, which yeah. It has so many loaded connotations.
Which,
So I'm
frankly, let's be real. People who rate as a D on the disc personality profile can be a giant D.
correct, yes, but I have tried. I hope I'm not. I have tried not to be. But like, I'll go to a networking event and I will chat with 20 people. Some I know, some I don't, and I have moved past the like collecting as many business cards. My wife will find like one person and be like, we're best friends. This is the new godparent of our child. We are besties. We scheduled 17 events with each other over the next 3 months. We're coming to like, it's amazing to me. And so I almost feel like, especially from the podcast perspective, like what you're talking about, the focus on the guest, that a lot of these, high C, high S introverts would actually do what you're saying better in the podcast setting than a high
Yeah.
D, high I, because it's like just focus on, this one person through the camera. Don't worry about whoever else is watching.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Because I think there's some the danger of being a high D, high I is that you can churn and burn relationships because you're flitting around too fast as the high I, or and again being a giant D, you can only look at people as targets if you haven't found a way to soften some of the edges of both of those categories. And I speaking as a high D, high I,
Right.
and very low C, very low S, I had to personally work on myself to make sure that those things didn't take over. And then I later regretted how people either perceived me or the interaction. At 44 years old, eventually you've had enough of those trips and falls that you work on it or you don't, I suppose, but I did. And I recognize that I might be a terrible podcaster without having that clarity that you point out. The idea that the C and the S might be very good at it. I'm with you.
All right, so I want to come back to this in a second, but talk about this week's newsletter. You all are watching this. It releases on a Tuesday. This Friday, newsletter is about quarterly planning. So last week in the newsletter, we did yearly planning. Surprise, surprise, we're now breaking it down into quarterly planning. So whether that's rocks and quarters and EOS, whether that's 12-week years, we're going to go through the lawyer with a life take on quarterly planning, where I zig when everybody else zags. Hope you'll check that out. But let's go back to Josh. Okay, so sort of off topic from what we said, but responsive to what we started with, but responsive to what you just said. It's interesting to me the way you mention having to like shave off some of the edges, because I've 1,000% had to do that. But two, I also find that like some people I don't think realize that we're being honest about what we're doing. Like, hey, we have shaved off so many edges. We are truly focused on building this great relationship with you. We don't actually want anything from you right now, tomorrow. And a bunch of people immediately are just like, I don't believe that. Like, where's the sales pitch? Where are you sending me a contract after this podcast? So, like, I think there's an extra benefit here for the ability to slowly build that relationship, create that collaborative content, have the win-win-win. Because, like, I go to some of these lunches with, medical doctors, and they're just like, so send me business. And I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, I think this gives us some of that,
Yep.
It bridges some of that gap to like really
It
know each
does.
other or
Well, and one of the things that I think behooves anybody attempting to do this would be to be bizarrely transparent. Say, I host this show with this topic, with this type of person on, because yes, it helps the audience. It also helps your business, and it helps me find a way to build a relationship with you so that we can find a two-way street. That's the only reason why I would do this, is because I'm a business person who is genuinely interested in people. So I'm genuinely interested in you, but I'm really, truly interested in the two-way street. And that is what I'm working towards. Are you willing to consider trying this with me? Because if you're bizarrely transparent, one, that's refreshing. Two, it gives you an opportunity if that person goes, okay, this doesn't cost me a thing. You're not going to charge me. I'm
right.
willing to part with some of my time. So they're willing to give it a try, because really, let's say you go for the sales pitch that night. You go, yeah, you got to shop with me. Okay, you've been found out as a fraud, but it still costs them nothing and they can say no. So it's really low risk. But then when you prove that you're not a fraud, and you do check up on them later and ask them to maybe do another show or remind them to trade some social media stuff back and forth, and you check in and see how their kids are and just do life. then you'll be seen as the real deal. And once again, that's refreshing. So I love like crazy, bizarre transparency about the process because it also shows that you're critically thinking about how you're going to do things. This takes some thought to choose to do it this way. The old version of chasing every networking event and grabbing piles of cards, to your point, is the lowest form of networking out there. Yet we've all tried it. And then hopefully many of us have figured out that that's just generally, at the best, the very beginning of a potential connection.
I mean, I stopped carrying business cards on me.
Same. Yeah, I'm using the Blank app now on my phone.
Yeah. Didn't you make one of them?
I did. And I still have it. If anybody wants to use the Get Seen .pro app, it's great. But Blink clearly was better funded, and they're doing a great job. So I am actually going to eventually shut down our app, just because it's the right thing to do for the users. I will be sending some email blasts soon saying that we've found somebody who has done all of the things we intended to do.
And there we go. But my issue is if I give somebody else a card, I can't control what happens with that card. If I get somebody else's card, or we Blink or we Get Seen.pro or whatever, then like I can reach out too. And so I found that like, hey, handing somebody a business card was a really good way to kill the conversation and any follow-up conversation.
Yeah. So what I used to do, I had a card for a while, and I tried something, a different design, and I hated it. But I had a card that had a white backer that was matte, so I could write on it. And it still had some text on there. So if I didn't write on it, sometimes, I'm sure you've done this, here's my card is kind of the go away.
Right.
Like, I've had to do that sometimes. Yeah, man, I have a guy's face in my head, and I think I've got his name, and I'm not going to say it because I want to be kind. But I was like, could I give you more cards to get you to go away? Like, how do you go away? And so every once in a while, it was that. But if I liked to write on the back, because if somebody really wanted to connect with me, I could put something on there that would trigger purpose in our conversation. Like, if I just met you and I wanted to interact with you, Jordan, I think I have a referral partner for you. Could you call me? And leave that in your pocket. And if you call me back and engage with me, I'll know that there's a shot that we could go deeper because I've said something on that card, that would trigger your interest. And then if you don't follow through that, then it's like, okay, fine, then we're probably already in misalignment.
Well, and from this conversation, like a 30 to 60-minute podcast, I think gives you that many more opportunities than, a card with some writing on it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, there's great value in it. It's the business development play. I can't stress it enough that podcasting is the ultimate business development tool if you leverage it that way. No, if you've got budget and you can add, marketing dollars behind it and pay for eyeballs, you might be able to grow an audience faster. And maybe there's some more strategy you could layer on. Everybody's got a different business and a different opportunity. So we always evaluate maybe the extras, but I always start with and maintain my focus on the business development side of things, because there's your ROI. Podcasting, like if you were to hire us, I mean, you're looking at least $5,000 a quarter, if not more. And at that price point, you want ROI. And so we've got to find it for you. And the honest version of this, and I know a lot of people will sell all sorts of podcasting services, all sorts of video services, and promise the world as if everybody's going to watch your stuff. And it's almost always been a lie. And it's always frustrated me. And so this has been my authentic and honest way of solving that problem, that, you're not going to get famous. Let's just say it. You're not going to get famous off this video, but you might get famous with one person who really could drive some great value in your life.
Well, and I think, Mr. Beast 4.5 years later, so one a week, so 200 episodes. Like if there's, what is it? Is it the Q score? That's like the how famous are you?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So like, so I'm not going to have 1 million people on my podcast, but at the point that I have friends who have 400 or 500 episodes. So like if those 400 or 500 people remember you from the podcast episode, plus if 100 people download, every episode, and you figure people will stay for a slew of them, like
Yep.
you're stacking singles and doubles at scale.
Right. And then that goes back to the high ticket transaction thing, because if every one of your transactions were, a $10 transaction with a 20% profit margin, so you make $2 per transaction, and every listener just needs one of them in their life ever, you have made no money and you will go broke. Because that's, with the numbers that you just shared, you might make $1,200 over the course of a couple hundred episodes. It doesn't work if that were your business model. But if your business does higher dollar transactions, so you need lower quantity and higher quality, this fits swimmingly.
Also, okay, so you mentioned the baker, and for 45 minutes, I've been thinking like, okay, if a baker came on and gave me like three different kinds of bread, and then a cheesemonger was also there with three different kinds of cheese, and then like wine or beer with three different kinds, and then now you could do like a 3x3, 9 across, try each thing with each thing, and then like we got together once a month, once a quarter with a group. You had a box delivered to you to watch the episode, to taste it as they're tasting it and making, like, I think that could be big bucks.
Well, and it could be big bucks as a show, but there's a different purpose behind the structure of that show then, right? Because
Okay.
that is more of an audience play. And I do love the idea of collaboration. Let's say you've got 3x3, and then each of those three have three items. So now you've got that 3x3,
Right.
or that matrix of things where you can test all sorts of stuff. You got your permutations, whatever it is. It's like 18 combinations, I think. I love that. And it's really interesting. I mean, that's like Jon Favreau had his chef show and the
Yeah.
movie Chef. And I
Yeah.
loved both of them because it's so interesting to watch people who love food enjoying time with each other while they love food. Great shows. And if you could do a video podcast like that and make sure it's audible enough that you can do the actual audio version of a podcast for it, it
Right.
could be a smash of a show. But then my challenge would be, one, is there a business development play where those three people who are interacting can make sure that there's some kind of collaborative value where their businesses can grow? Or are they going to have a box that they're selling as a subscription package to get to an audience? And then, of course, now we've got to build the audience. And that's the one thing that you probably need seed money for in order to pay to get
Okay.
eyeballs for
I
the
see what you mean.
audience. So then now we've got a business plan and a business model around having a show in order to sell the subscription box. Instead, if we were to, if they were, I'm trying to think about this because I go to the St. Cloud Farmers Market and they've got a couple of bread vendors there.
Yeah.
And if one of those bread vendors decided to have a show and they had enough of a business back end where they could make a lot of bread, so there was a potential that they could sell to a lot of small restaurants. They could potentially do a podcast where they have restaurateurs on and local regional restaurateurs, the local Italian shop, the local halal shop, all these different people who make locally owned, homemade, farm to table type experiences, and they could become the bread vendor by building relationship with them.
Right.
And so then they could all kind of get famous together with a great audience over time, and maybe eventually get to the box by virtue of having built an audience that is genuinely interested in them. That red vendor under a tent at the St. Cloud Farmers Market, they're going to do a show. I would tell them the show is about loving locally owned small restaurant food and bringing the restaurateurs and the chefs and the waiters and waitresses and all of the people from those staffs in to have great conversation about food and family. And
So
that's the show.
in essence, like you're not, I get it. So really, when you're saying this as the concept for a show, this is a bootstrapped starter show. Like this
Right.
is how you monetize it from from day one.
Right. So the ROI is in the relationships,
Yeah.
and that gives you the fuel to sustain yourself during the marathon. Gary Vaynerchuk did how many videos of Wine Library way back when in
Well,
order
dude,
to
the
get
first
to
one
it?
is like terrible lighting, and he's like all the way back in the corner like this, and
Yeah,
it's
so
like amazing
I
where
did
it
a
came
study
from.
of episodes 1 through 5, 10, 50, 100, and then every 100 all the way up to his current one a couple of years ago,
There we go.
just to see like where did we start, how did we do. And what I found fascinating with Gary is you're right. Episode 1 was just dog crap in a bowl. It was so bad. Yet he was the only one doing it,
Right.
and he had guts. He gave it a go. And then episode 2 was already better. Like there was a market improvement between 1 and 2 because I think he probably watched it and went, "Wow, I'm all like that. You're like this drinking wine." I mean, it was really rough. But then you get out to episode like 100, and he had added some real production value. Episode like 2, 3, 400 was really clean. He had the formula down, and he had added even more production value. And then what I found really interesting is he backed off the production value after about 500. Not much, but he
Okay.
relaxed a little bit because he already had a huge following. People knew that he was going to deliver on valuable content, but the lighting got a little bit off. The microphones weren't always as good. He got a little bit more casual, but still kept with the quality of the content. It's not like it was the same wine over and over. He wasn't
Right.
squeezing in unnecessary sales points. He wasn't veering from his mission. But I just noticed he found a zone where he didn't go back down to old like episode 1 low production value, but he did relax. So I just found that very interesting about how he approached it. But it took him a while to arrive. I think that was the lesson in having watched how he did what he did.
Well, and I think it's interesting because there's a lot, like, I think there are a lot of the larger influencers who are pushing what you just explained that Gary did, like, don't care as much about the look, but you kind of have to get over that hump to not have that, to be able to do that in essence.
Right. Well, there's an ascent where you can start seeing that it's working, and you've got to have the guts to have it not work for a while until you figure out how it works. And when you figure out how it works, I think it's natural to want to make it work even better. And so you're going to make micro changes as you keep getting better and better. And then at some point, you're going to go, oh, I micro changed too far. This is exhausting. And it was still working back here. And I'm still growing in followers and it's still working. So I can take the pedal off on certain things while still delivering to my audience. And so I think there's just this natural, like, you just got to keep slugging, slogging up the hill. And that's a really cool learning process.
Also, I mean, for anybody listening and Josh, if you want the entire concept of Jordan's life pushed down into 3 sentences, what Josh just said, like it starts out shitty, you make it better, and then you realize you can actually pull back and not make it as good and still be as happy once you like get over the super better. Welcome to my world.
Yeah. I think ideally it's going to be everybody's world. I mean, I like people who pursue excellence, but excellence in all things is actually, in my opinion, impossible.
Right.
Excellence, excellence in your business as the practitioner needs to be handed off so your business can stay excellent, but then you can take the gas off a little bit so you can be excellent in other areas. And you're a cool dad. You're an excellent dad. I love watching
Thanks, man.
everything you and your son are doing. It is so much fun. And I don't think if you still had the gas pedal to the floor on behalf of your business, you've got a great business. You've got great people operating that business that allows you to take the gas off a little bit there so you can put the gas on where arguably it's the most life ROI you'll ever get, which is pouring into your family.
Well, yeah, and thank you. And it's finding the leverage points. So like me doing all the legal work at my anal level was great until it was impossible. Now me hiring, training, and running meetings at my anal level allows me to have 6, 10, 15 people do the work at my anal level. So like, some points it's not pulling back on the outcome, it's pulling back on your role in the outcome to still
That's right.
have the outcome.
Spot on. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. So our businesses need us to arrive at excellence that is documented, it is repeatable, It is trainable. And then you can let great people continue that excellence and hopefully build on that excellence because that frees you up. That's the goal.
So let me do this. Next week, we have Elise Buie on. For those of you that don't know, Elise runs a family firm out of Washington. Also, just like an incredibly amazing person, and now is doing some coaching for lawyers as well. We're going to talk through what it takes to live the life you want. So some of that is courage. A lot of that is money. Some of that is systems, the right people. Like Elise and I are going to have this conversation. I have no idea how it's going to go exactly, but I'm 100% sure it's going to be awesome because anytime you get to talk with Elise is a fun time. So I hope you'll see us back here next Tuesday at 6 p.m. for that one. That being said, Josh, I want to finish with something that's not going to be one final question because you touched on, I don't know, 5-6 minutes ago about how like you want to have ROI in that show eventually at the point you're spending a lot of money on it. So I am curious for either the like 5 best tips to get ROI or the 5 biggest mistakes people make, which is why their show doesn't get ROI, something in those lines. But like I said, I was not going to start that conversation if we really only had 4 minutes, because I think that's a slightly longer conversation.
Yeah, so that's interesting. 5 best tips to find ROI. Well, I mean, honestly, some of this conversation already is kind of like the grand best tip in the sense that, I know a lot of people have gone on the podcast journey, and I don't know if you knew this, but the average stopping point for a podcaster is 8 episodes. They're done after 8 episodes. And the reason why is
8 weeks, 8 months, 8 days?
No, 8 releases, 8
just
episode
period, regardless
releases,
of
period.
cadence.
Yep.
Okay.
And the reason why makes a lot of sense because there was no ROI. It's crickets. And in my opinion, and I don't have any data to back this up, there's a misalignment in expectations and reality. I'm going to start a podcast and everybody's going to listen. No, they're not. I don't care. It's just outside of other forces like massive email list, some kind of massive social following, really high budget for digital ads of some kind, making it onto Oprah and having her endorse your podcast, like some kind of outside force outside of your podcast. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. And so that's why a lot of them, people start, they go strong, they feel great about it because they've sold themselves a bill of goods and they'll walk away. And so, I guess the overall grand tip is that you've got to get into it with clarity that one, it's, understand how long the road is. If the goal is, 5,000 downloads a month, you're asking to be in the top 1% of podcasters. Most shows never achieve that. And, you're actually in the top, gosh, I think it's like the top 10% at 500 downloads per episode. That's a massive download opportunity. And so the goals have to be set right, but it takes even a while to get there. So that's why the plan of having this as a business development strategy makes so much sense. And so that's number one in my mind, is getting your mindset right, that it is a business development strategy, and call it the cake. This is the whole dessert right here. Now the frosting, to me, is all of the digital assets that are created as a result of the show. Right. And I guess there is no, in this analogy, room for the audience. I mean, because I'm so focused on the core of your experience is the relationship building, and the icing on that cake is all the digital assets that you get that you feel pressure to have to release. And I guess that's one of the other lessons. I guess at least another one more point. If you're going to do it right, make it a video. A lot of people hear podcasts and they think, oh, okay, I need 2 microphones and something to record on, which would be true. Podcast is traditionally an audio-based platform. But if you're already sitting there talking, you might as well have a camera on and get yourself onto visual platforms. So economize on your time. Work smart, not hard. So if you're a podcaster, be a video podcaster.
Wait, I want to jump in for a second because you said this twice now, the work smart, not hard. I want to push back on work fun because if it's fun, it's not hard, it's challenging, it's a puzzle, it's something, it's enjoyable as
Attitude's
opposed
everything.
to, yeah, like that's my thing. So I love talking to people on a one-on-one basis. I love creating content. I love sitting in my office at a chair wearing a Hawaiian shirt, pushing my business forward from a marketing perspective. Like that I think makes it really easy to do the complicated things because they
Yes.
become a challenge instead of a burden.
Correct. Yeah, attitude's everything. Mindset is everything on this. So yes, I like work smart, not hard in the sense that if you're doing an audio podcast and you turn on a camera, that's the flip of a switch effectively, right?
Right.
And so now I've gotten two things, not one. It would be harder to say, oh, I also need to do video. Now that I'm done with my podcast, I now need to go do this video activity. And do them at the same time. Your
Right.
content is hopefully authentic. It's really you. And so it's worth sharing in multiple places. So please economize on your time, which is the work smart, not hard, and then find a way. And I'm probably not the person who's on the show. I would love to see people delegating to companies like mine or maybe somebody else who can cut up your show in a way that you get a whole bunch of social media content out of that effort. If you're a half-hour show, there's a high likelihood there's 5 to 10 1 minute moments, 1 minute ish, that are worth replaying. So go ahead and cut those up and get them out there and have a mindset that there's one piece. And this is a Gary Vaynerchuk thing too. Do you remember probably about 7 years ago, maybe, he said, be your own media company. Everybody out there is a marketing channel, but if you're not your own media company creating your own stuff, you're effectively broadcasting static. And of course, you've got to have old gray hair like I do to remember when you would turn on the rabbit ears television and you would literally get static. It would be nothing. And it would be broadcasting dead air with the white noise sound. And I'm describing this very in depth because I'm having these moments with my daughter recently where I'll say something about like, I don't know, we made jokes about the manzier versus the bro the other day, which is an old Seinfeld reference. And it was crickets in the room. And I realized everybody in the room, except for my wife and I, was mystified by that old reference. So I'm sharing about static because somebody's listening to this going, I don't know what static is. What do you mean broadcasting nothing? So Google it. But anyhow, so Gary was describing that if you're not marketing on your own behalf and creating content on your own behalf, you're basically a dead air channel. That's a shame, right?
Yeah.
So he said you should be your own media company and create your own content. But then he came up with this 86-page slide deck, which was a really big deal about a year later. And it was just him explaining that he creates anchor pieces of content from stage. When he's paid $100,000 to stand on stage, he's paying somebody a couple $1,000s to chase him around all day, including that on stage moment, and film copious amounts of content, including his 45-minute speech. And in every case, that speech gets cut up into a whole bunch of smaller pieces. So he does one day's effort. He flies in somewhere, flies out. And over the course of maybe the 12 hours that he calls that hard work day, he gets hundreds of pieces of content out of it because he's had his well-trained minions do brilliant things with it. And that was his encouragement to we other businesses to create one piece of content or maybe one day's worth of content and have your team slice it up as much as they can possibly slice it up and then deliver it so that once again you're economizing on your time. So this podcast thing, make it a video podcast and have somebody cut it up for you, and now you're operating at a more efficient level. I was going to say a higher level, but there's a lot of different versions of high levels, and this one's a super efficient level. And again, that's the Hippie Capitalist Love Fest because you want your guests to see themselves as much as possible out on the interwebs as you're celebrating your relationship. So those are just a couple of my points on, and I think I gave you three so far. Mindset's
I have
everything.
no idea.
Work smart,
We got it
not
recorded.
hard, and cut up your content intentionally.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
So there's
And
3 points right there.
I want to chime in on that for a second. So, like, a lot of people listening to this are lawyers. A lot of them are billing by the hour. Some of those are billing, 3, 5, 7.50 an hour. For a $50,000 a year person to follow you around with a video camera, that's like $25 an hour. Now, mind you, that's every hour. But like, if you are sitting here dreading an hour a week to make content or a couple hours a week for this, like, you could make that swap, bill a $7.50 hour, and pay for 30, $25 an hour hours.
Right.
So maybe
Right. Well,
it's
and that's one reason. I mean, it was so, back to what we do here. I'll pull my calculator out and play this game. Let's say they picked the lowest tier in our business, and we're one of the few who does what we do exactly, but there's others who do stuff. So call it 5,000 a quarter divided by $750 an hour. All right. So you need almost 7 hours of work to
yeah,
afford us for a quarter's worth of our version of how we do content. Not so bad. 7 hours per quarter.
right.
So and of course there's the time that you have to engage, which is a couple of hours in order for us to get a whole bunch of content out of it. But it is very doable for the high billing attorney to pull this type of thing off with the right people around them.
Well, also, I think the personal branding aspect of the podcast makes it easier for that attorney to go from 500 to 750 and then hire an associate at 300. And then as the
Yep.
podcast generates more referrals, be like, okay, well, you can go to me, you can go to associate. And then like you've created this engine of
Yeah.
a real business instead of just a high paying job.
Relationships are rarely scalable, but certain behaviors can help you scale relationships. And this is one that actually helps you scale relationships. And as you scale, you do have to bring people on to serve your relationships. And that's one way to start scaling your practice.
I love it, man. All right. Anything else? Anything I missed?
Goodness. I mean, there's so much this is one of those topics where we could probably
I
go
could
for
have you
hours
back
and
on
days. Oh, I
in a
think
period of
I
time
would
as a core
I,
guest.
I would enjoy every bit of that. So if you would like me back, anytime I get to hang out with you is a very good day.
There we go. How about we do I mean, having gone through this process, then you'll get my emails. I want like a Josh breaks down the Laid Back Life podcast and where we can improve it. And I'll
Oh,
take it
well,
on air.
yeah. I mean, and I don't take this as pressure since you said that live on air because I would have done that if you had just texted me and asked, but sure.
There we go. But document not don't create, right? Like here we could like
Yes,
legitimately
that really is that old maxim is really true too, right? I
yeah.
mean, so you're not creating when you're podcasting because you are documenting somebody else's expertise and their natural reactions and your expertise and your natural reactions. And by virtue of documenting who you are together, you actually are creating. But if you think about it, you're creating a whole new experience of that information. But it is way easier to document what is than it is to innovate. And I years ago I thought that I had to be the creator for every piece of content. I had to say something that had never been said before. And I started writing this book. And it's 80, 90 pages deep right now. And it's not bad content. And
But
some of that, what's that?
but however,
Well, yeah, right. So the but is that took me 12 to 18 months to be proud of it,
uh
right? And so I don't have 12 to 18 months to turn content out. Not especially at that size. I mean, 90 pages goes fast. But I do have the bandwidth to spend time with people who have spent their whole life being experts at what they do. I've spent my whole life being an expert at what I do. And we can hang out together and document that hangout. And by virtue of that hangout, we are creating something. I don't always
right.
predict what, but we're creating something together. So the document don't create is a behavior thing, but if you do it like we're describing, that documentation becomes creation, which is a really cool play.
I dig it, man. All
Philosophy.
right.
I got a
Here we
degree in
go.
it. Can never turn it off.
Well, but like this is like the whole point of the podcast is to be able to do this in the most effective, efficient manner for building relationships, for selling the high ticket items, for creating content, for building referral sources, for staying in touch with people, for personal branding yourself. I mean, like there's a million things that we can talk about having done it in action, having you watch us do it in an hour and 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good place for us to stop.
I think it's a great place for us to stop. And I will take that invitation for the next conversation. You tell me what we're talking about, I'll show up.
There we go. All right. Thank you to everybody who watched and listened. Thank you, Josh Pies, for being with us. I highly suggest if you like this episode, check out last week's for other Josh Wilson, talking about the same topic from a different perspective in a way that hopefully convinces you to put on a podcast. And then we'll see you back here next week for Elise Buie and I chatting about what it takes to live the life you want. Have a great week, everybody.